Hello everyone, my name is Heveine Baban. I'm a first year PhD student at the University of Heriot-Watt in Dubai campus, and really delighted to be presenting the paper today, which is exploring the potentials of project controls within the construction industry, drivers and challenges, with the support of Dr. Krisanthi and Professor Yasemin, who are my supervisors. Just a quick background about myself. About 7 years ago, I did my BSc in quantity surveying, and since then I have been working in industry as a quantity surveyor and sort of branched my way path through to project controls and being a framework project controls manager on a large-scale framework, being United Utilities as it was, and really enjoyed this area of my expertise, particularly because I was managing about 40 project managers in terms of really monitoring their projects, completions and costs. And it was then when I really wanted to do a PhD, because I could see a lot of mistakes being done in terms of controlling projects, and being a quantity surveyor as well as managing and seeing project managers, how they control projects. It was quite different, and sometimes there were issues and that could have been handled. Some of them, they were too late, and project managers tried to control them too late in the project, and there were even project control measures that should have been taken place earlier, and they were not. And for this reason, it really led me to try to answer some of these questions, which is really my focus and aim of my PhD. What is project controls really? And is there really a system or process mechanism in which we can control projects across the project life cycle? If there is, then it doesn't seem to be clear to me, and I'm sure a lot of professionals would agree. In terms of also key stakeholders, as I said, quantity surveyors, they do monitor projects and control certain aspects of projects, whether that is cost or time or quality. At the same time, we also have stakeholders such as project managers who try to also control costs and their project, as well as time and quality. So should there be a systematic controlled way of doing projects controls? And throughout this presentation, I'll try to sort of outline the drivers and the challenges that face the construction industry, in particular, in particular with project controls mechanisms. I'm going to start off by discussing the history and development of project controls. Project controls goes all the way back to the 18th century, believe it or not, and in particular project cost management, which began ever since the 15th century. And it was really started off by project managers who used tools such as Gantt charts and bar charts, which were used to monitor their projects and still being used to this present day. However, there's been little evidence on the history of project forecasting, and it was only up to the 20th century that project forecasting was being used, and in particular predictive calculations, which began in World War II. Although there were some attempts by some mathematicians such as Newton and Pascal, who did focus on some forecasting techniques. However, it really is interesting to note that previously project managers were more concerned about how far behind a project was. However, when we are currently these days switched to predicted time and cost, So one could really question which is more effective, and I'll explore this further when I get to the project controls mechanism section of this presentation. What's even more interesting is the next slide. There have been over 78 government reports issued from in the UK, which has really brought attention across internationally. I think it all started from the UK, as far as literature could point out, starting with the Simon report. And if you really look closely, not really much has changed over the years. If you really want to be ironic about it, I could only see that one report, which is the Egan report, really speaks about putting an agenda for time, cost and quality. And however, still no progress has been made. And even more ironic than that, it looks like with every report that's been issued, recommendations have been there have been recommendations at the end of each report. However, further reports that come later after those reports, the same issues are arising, and the same recommendations being made. And it's really interesting that really nothing has been done about this, and which therefore brings us to the point that are there any control measures even put in place, and why are projects failing, and why is projects still suffering from poor quality, time overruns and cost overruns. So when we come to look at literature and defining project controls, it's very interesting to note that project controls is most often mentioned in the context of project management, and the majority of scholars do relate project controls to mean only two factors, and that's time and schedule. However, other sources believe that project controls is more than that, and I really do completely agree. There could be the control of project risk, procurement, quality, project performance. And this really brings us to the question of what are the boundaries of project controls. And therefore project controls does play a big part across the project life cycle, where you see risk and the control of risk, which spans from the beginning of the project to the end even, and procurement at the beginning stages of a project. And you have quality, which spans across the whole life cycle of the project. So project controls could be more than time and schedule, and there have been a lot of attempts to define project controls in literature. Some say it's a process, some say it's a system. However, for the purpose of my study, I really do believe it is a system, because for a project to be successful, we really need a system in place that controls, if you like, specific processes throughout the life cycle of the project. And we really need a bird's eye view, being the system in place to monitor that and take action when necessary. It's also very important to note that when scholars do define project controls, most do believe that project controls begins after project planning. And perhaps this is where we are going wrong, since project planning is a really important aspect, and should there be no planning in project planning at the beginning of project for project controls and before execution, perhaps we could question that perhaps the lack of control prior to project execution has led to project failure on a number of occasions in projects. So why do projects succeed or fail? Most of the time we are quite familiar with this model in terms of if a project is successful, it's really delivered within time, cost and quality, and some even extend this model to risk and safety. However, literature really does fail to address why projects fail. If we do really get this point, then there's really much more chance that projects in the construction industry do succeed. So defining project failure has been difficult to find, but from what I found from literature and what really fits is that projects fail because of two factors. There's planned failure and actual failure. Where planned failure is usually the result of poor planning, such as unrealistic budgets or undefined scope. Actual failure is when the objectives of the project were well planned, however failed to achieve the objectives within acceptable boundaries. At the same time, since each project is unique and at the risk of failure at some point in the construction stages, literature does advise that specific and special management techniques and mechanisms are required in order to keep the project on track. And it really does widely recognize that the construction industry in particular, that the failure is bound by inadequately being planning and monitoring as the major cause of project failures. So the next section will look at into detail what project control measures and tools are currently being used on construction projects and how they impact on project performance of the projects. To really understand what measures should be taken to improve projects. And this really brings us to the question of why are projects still failing, and is it because of the absence of ineffective project control mechanisms? So the project control methodologies that are currently being used in industry range from, for example, earned value to critical path analysis, the use of BIM, and even milestones throughout the project. And however, although they try to improve project performance to some extent in terms of controlling projects, there are some drawbacks, and they may not accurately solve problems and in fact may be the reason for failing projects. If the tool is not effective, or if the tool is effective, it could potentially lead to project failure because of, for example, when it comes to earned value, if earned value is used as a tool to, for example, forecast predictive performance on a project, if the schedule or budget is incorrect, then you have a failing project using earned value because it doesn't accurately project the proper forecast. So there are pros and cons to using such tools, and therefore it really poses the question of whether these tools are really effective measures across the project life cycle, and when exactly are they being used. To date, I haven't really seen some sort of model that looks at pre-construction and pre-contract in terms of controlling the project, and these all seem to be post-contract and during construction. So my PhD really looks into project control methods. When exactly are they being used from inception all the way to completion of the project, and it really highlights the big gap in terms of are these tools really project control tools, or are they really the reasons why project controls fail, projects fail, and in which case there needs to be some sort of system in place that sort of is like a recipe all fit all across the whole life cycle of the project, that can be used as an effective project control method across specific places in the project life cycle. So there are a number of challenges that project control faces, and it could be either by the individual who's controlling the project, be it the quantity surveyor, project manager, various stakeholders, even the project controller as a role itself, and also implementing project controls activities across projects may face barriers across the project life cycle. In particular, a good example is the use of applications or software that are currently being introduced in the industry. There's a lot of applications. A good example is BIM, Building Information Modeling, and that is trying to assist the client in seeing the end product on a visual display model, and in a way trying to cut costs and wastes by really designing things digitally, so that to cut down wastage, construction wastage. However, it really still does not solve the problem of why projects fail, because we still get cost overruns, we still get schedule overruns on projects, and also poor quality. So it does not seem to mean that applications, the better the application, that the better the success rate of the project. In fact, it's really the system and the process that needs to be really looked at and monitored. Another point to make is that there is a lack of support and commitment from senior management from organizations when it comes to project controls. Things are very fast pacing in the construction industry, and it's often hard to be heard if you are the project manager or the project controller. Particular for me, I've noticed this, and I've really lived it in industry. I've time and time again raised issues. Things need to be done, but senior management don't want to take responsibility, or they don't want to waste their time. This really needs to change, I believe. Another thing is that as a project controller, I was non-professional. This is how we are looked at as a role in the construction, as a project team, unlike the project manager, and therefore controlling projects, we would really be a bit of a pain and also costly to project managers, because we'd be eating off the project margins and therefore be of high overhead costs. So this is also something of a challenge if the construction industry does include project controllers as a key role player, then they should really be part of a member of a team, and an important member of a team, and as is the project manager in their own right. Other things to look at as a challenge is being perceived as picking on members of the team as a project controller. I was trying to assist a lot of project managers with improving their project performance. However, this was perceived as picking on them rather than assisting them, and perception is really projection in that case. So there's a lot to be learned, and a lot of challenges that project controls does face in the construction industry. So in conclusion, it's really clear that there are a lot of challenges, and therefore no wonder the construction industry is still fragmented and hasn't improved due to an absence of a formalized project controls process plan or system. And therefore, the intention of my thesis is to really develop a smart project controls decision support framework or a process map, and a set of recommendations that really bridges the gap between the issues facing projects in construction throughout the project lifecycle, and that can be used as a basis to make smart decisions by various stakeholders in the project team. I really hope you enjoyed this presentation, and thanks again to the organizers of this conference, and look forward to many more. Thank you.